All right, my name is Dave Cowles. This is English 110 with Professor Baker. I'm going to be doing my digital storytelling genre video about my dominant narrative that I've been exploring, which is the dominant narrative of technology. Now, the narrative of technology is that technology is good and that it's helping everyone. And there are a million examples of that, like from the uses of the Internet of Things, which is the internet applied to multiple bases. Then you have the ability for someone with a cell phone in, South India to then learn things, better his life, and make his way, quite literally, into a better way of life by making better things that are worth more, from getting scrap products and all sorts of innovation that goes on over there once they have access to that information. And you see a lot of upward social mobility because of it. And it's benefited a lot of us. It's during this COVID time, it has helped keep people in contact and keep people in school or at work, which is very cool. So, but the concealed narrative of that is what happens with all of the data that is created from the use of all of these things. Tech companies take that information and do all sorts of crazy stuff with it. The same companies that are creating these so-called essential now devices and technologies are also the ones that create the same thing that are used to hack government systems and invade people's privacy and conduct illegal transactions online and all sorts of things like that. So there's a definite dark side, a definite flip side. And for people who know about the dark web and all that stuff, that'd be a very good example. That was actually started as the CIA program that was designed to make covert operatives have better underground technologies out in the field. And then the hackers got a hold of it, and it is what it is now. That's the very short history. But that's what happened. So, and then you have things like the Edward Snowden incident or whistleblowing event or whatever you want to call it from 2013, where he basically came out saying and had the documents to prove that he released these documents to the press that essentially proved the government had been taking all phone calls and tap information and text information and GPS information if they could get it, depending on the device, and storing it all in a database that he partially helped create, whether he knew it or not. And that was a big problem. People were really freaked out about that, but the program still exists, and it's actually not the biggest concern, I believe, of the common man. And here's why. The real data that you're creating that's being used against you is what you're creating on your cell phone. It is the taps, it's the clicks, it's the time between swipes, it's all that kind of weird stuff. And they're monitoring you essentially through your device, whether possibly through your actual camera or just through your taps, motions, and your locations as you move around. And that information is what's being turned against people. That information is what's being used to put into algorithms to sell you stuff that you may or may not want. And the issue with that, unless either you're not into consumerism, the main problem with that is that it then takes away your freedom of choice. You go to the store to get a red sweater, right, and you see a blue sweater next to it. You might like that blue sweater, and you might get that even though you came for the red one. And they take that choice away in the online world, and you never found something that could have been better that you just hadn't thought of already, but you could have run out into in the real world. And that sort of tailored experience actually tends to tint people's perception of reality and of common events even, as they only see what they want to hear. And that creates a huge problem with politics. That creates a huge problem with social dissonance, as everyone only can confirm their own bias. And there's not a room for real information or shared information to exist where people can find a middle point between things on all sorts of issues, from politics to like how to cook and drive cars and stuff like that. And the fact that tech companies are willingly enforcing that is a big problem, because we're all creating our own worlds, and then as you become more evolved in your digital world, that's all you see. And if all you see is what they're showing you, then you're living in their world, and that's a big problem. Because if you don't align with the vision of that company or of that programmer even, or whatever the deal is, then that leaves you potentially liable for them to distort your reality. And we've seen YouTube do this a bunch of times. That's been a big problem. And there's all sorts of examples in politics, or with right now they're taking down any videos that don't align with the World Health Organization's decree on what we should be doing for COVID-19, which is interesting, because what about home remedies? We're going to just take those down. There's good stuff on there. But programs or of spyware and things like that, or the abilities to hack into other systems, those kind of things are only able to be monitored by the tech companies themselves, and they will monitor them and do whatever in their best interest. And that research and development have become so intertwined now, as they should be to an extent, but at this point they're too intertwined, and you get this sort of tunnel vision where things get made that don't need to be made. And that's another thing that we need to not worry about. I'm not here to worry you, but a thing that we need to begin to take seriously, as these companies are going to be doing they're going to be owning everything. These companies are going to be defining the future, and that future is not going to be pretty if we let them poop on it. It's been being made. There's always new guns and new jet pilots and stealth technology and all that kind of spy stuff has always been being made, and there's already a pretty defined control for that, so that's not a main concern to the public. That's more of a main concern to higher up governing bodies and people who worry about those kind of issues. Then there is the whole social aspect of phones and technology, but I think everyone knows all that already, that like, oh, you didn't get the new iPhone, so you're not cool, kind of a thing, to put it really shortly. And that's dumb. Samsung makes more phones than anyone else, so if you want to talk big brand, like, Samsung's better than Apple. They make more phones, so why would Apple be considered the best phone company? Like, that's, who gets to decide that? And the social status is what people have bought into, is really what it's about. It's not about the technology itself. It's the cloak around it that people like. They don't like what it is because they don't know what it is. They just like how it was delivered to them. And they like so-and-so. They like insert famous person who does nothing here, who likes it, and then therefore they like it now because they saw them holding it on Instagram or whatever it was. But we all know about that, so that's not a big problem. But that is having major social damage to society as people become more and more judgy about likes and about all this stuff that doesn't really matter in the real world where people should be living, instead of in this technology world. I would hold my phone, but I'm using it to record. So, for potential solutions and other things like that, the laws are pretty vague and state-based about the selling of information and the distribution of technologies and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of tech development goes on in China now because it's cheaper to have labs over there. So there would be ways to circumvent the laws that would, say, prevent someone from creating or developing algorithms to hack your biometric data and then like anticipate all sorts of things, and then use your biometric data to sell you more stuff, because that's where the money is in selling stuff. The bigger brands, a lot of them will let you track your information because they have the bandwidth to put someone in charge of that. But a smaller company, you're not going to be able to track anything, and those can often be sketchier than the bigger companies, because smaller companies could be run by 3 hackers in Bangladesh who are like stealing credit card numbers and getting you to play a fake version of Flappy Bird, and that's a big problem. But yeah, by having the tech companies absorb the marketing companies, we would control the selling of information. That's just an idea. Could work. But the most important thing that we can do is become more educated about how our technology works and where all of that stuff is going. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the tech companies operating in their best interest. So we need to make it in their best interest to not screw with us, essentially, to keep our privacy. And if that means we have to pay them to do it, that might be the deal. If that means we have to subject them into the government and make it a government, the technology would be now part of the government, I think that'd be crazy. But it could work. But it's pretty crazy. So yeah,